In the very particular atmosphere of the year's final days, Sagittarius finds themselves standing in a rare kind of stillness, not loud, not dramatic, but deep enough for you to clearly feel every movement happening inside. This December doesn't arrive to comfort you, and it doesn't come to lull you to sleep. It arrives with a quieter kind of energy, like a soft lamp turned on in a dark room. Not blinding, but just bright enough for you to begin noticing the corners you've been avoiding for a long time. Sagittarius is used to motion, used to the journey, used to moving forward, fueled by faith and optimism. But as this year comes to a close, something feels different. A familiar pillar in your life, maybe your work, a relationship, a role you've played for years, or even the way you see yourself is beginning to shift. Not a sudden collapse, more like a slow tremor. Just enough to make you uneasy, and just enough to show you that you're no longer standing where you once were. You may have tried to ignore the signs: busyness, responsibilities, old routines carrying you forward on autopilot. But late December doesn't allow that anymore. The energy of this moment feels like a gentle question, asked quietly, but repeated again and again in your mind. Is this path still truly yours? Are the things you're holding on to still nourishing you, or have they slowly been draining you all along? What makes this period so sensitive is the honesty it brings with it. You begin to notice the exhaustion you once called normal. You realize some smiles have been worn for far too long. Some commitments were kept more out of duty than out of the heart. And somewhere deep inside, a part of you begins to speak, not demanding, not blaming, just asking to be heard. This is not the time to punish yourself for choices made in the past. Every step you took was necessary to bring you right here, to this exact moment. The end of the year doesn't come to erase your past. It comes to help you understand it, to understand why you chose what you chose, why you endured what you endured, and why now you can no longer live the same way. A mature Sagittarius carries a quiet strength. You've lived enough life to know that real change doesn't always begin with a dramatic action. Sometimes it begins with a simple admission that something isn't okay, that something needs adjusting, even if you can't yet name what it looks like. Being honest with your emotions alone is already a powerful step forward. December carries the energy of transition, not just between one year and the next, but between the person you were and the person slowly forming within you. You may feel as though you're standing between two shores, no longer fully belonging to the past, not yet touching the future. That in-between space can feel unsettling, but it's exactly there that new seeds begin to be planted. If your heart feels more sensitive now, more easily touched, that isn't weakness. It's a sign you're living more truthfully with yourself. If you find yourself thinking more about meaning, about values, about what truly matters, it's because you're ready for a deeper turning point, not to destroy everything, but to reorganize your life with clarity and compassion for who you are. And as you sit with these emotions, as you allow yourself to slow down amid the rush of the year's end, you begin to see that this quiet tension isn't here to frighten you. It's here to wake you up, to awaken conscious choice, to awaken the courage to live by your values, to awaken a light you may have forgotten somewhere along a long road. Some things are gently coming into view now, softly, honestly. And as you keep listening, as you stay with yourself in this stillness, you'll understand why this moment matters so much. Because right here, in this space that seems fragile, the foundation for deeper decisions is being formed. Little by little, very quietly, but with a strength that will last. And within that quiet strength, another need begins to rise more clearly than ever before. Not the need to move faster, not the need to prove anything to the world, but the need to feel safe in the deepest sense of the word. A sense of safety that doesn't come from the outside, that doesn't depend on someone understanding you or standing beside you. It begins with how you learn to hold yourself. By late December, Sagittarius may start to realize that you've lived with the doors wide open for a very long time. Open heart, open trust, even open personal boundaries that should have been protected. You once believed that living openly was a beautiful thing, and it is. But after going far enough, you begin to understand that not everyone who enters carries good intentions, and not every space deserves your heart. There are small signs, almost fleeting, but if you're attentive, you can feel them. A conversation that leaves you drained instead of supported. A look that makes you hesitate rather than feel encouraged. A vague sense of unease every time you share too much about your life. These moments aren't random. They are your intuition speaking softly, letting you know it's time to close a few doors. Safety in this season isn't just about avoiding visible danger. It's about protecting your inner calm, choosing not to absorb information that unsettles you, allowing yourself to stay silent when no explanation is required, keeping important plans to yourself, at least until they're strong enough to stand in the wind. Sagittarius carries a spirit of freedom, sometimes a kind of beautiful recklessness. But toward the end of this year, wisdom begins to walk beside that freedom. You no longer feel the need to prove strength by enduring everything. You begin to understand that real strength lies in discernment, choosing who gets close, choosing what's allowed to touch your emotions, choosing where you feel safe enough to return after long days. You may notice that when you start setting boundaries, not everyone welcomes them. Some people are used to you always being available, always accommodating, always there when they need you. And when you change, when you say no, or simply pull some of your energy back, they may react through words, through silence, or through a feeling that makes you doubt yourself. But remember this, boundaries are not walls meant to shut the world out. They are fences meant to tend your inner garden. Those who truly care for you will understand and respect them. Those who don't may have only loved the convenient version of you, not the real person within. December carries a reminder that is gentle, yet unmistakably clear. You don't need to share everything. You don't need to explain every decision. Not every pair of eyes deserves the right to judge your path. There are seasons in life when moving forward quietly is the safest way to go far. And as you begin to live this way, you'll feel a subtle shift. Your mind grows calmer, your emotions settle, your sleep deepens. You're no longer pulled into stories that aren't yours. That's the sign you're returning to where you truly belong, a place where you don't have to brace yourself just to survive. Safety now also means learning to trust your own sense of things. If something doesn't feel right, even without a clear reason, allow yourself to step back, not to run, but to observe, not out of fear, but to stay whole. You don't need to understand everything right away. Respecting your own feelings is enough. And within that protected stillness, as layers of noise slowly fall away, something very natural begins to happen. You start to see more clearly who truly walks beside you, who brings you peace simply by being present. These connections aren't loud, they don't need to be displayed, but they nourish you deeply and for a long time. And from these safe spaces, a new circle begins to form quietly, slow enough for trust to grow, strong enough for you to stay. As that circle slowly comes into focus, Sagittarius begins to look at themselves through a different lens, less harsh, less driven by the need to always be strong. Just an honest gaze, deep enough to admit that there were seasons when you gave too much, without ever stopping to ask whether you were still full yourself. You once believed that love meant sacrifice, always being there, never letting anyone down. But toward the end of this year, a new definition is quietly being written inside you. Self-love is no longer a vague idea or a beautiful slogan. It becomes something very ordinary and very real. It's stopping when you feel tired, instead of pushing a little further. It's choosing not to reply right away to messages that leave your heart feeling heavy. It's allowing yourself to change your mind without carrying guilt. This kind of self-love isn't loud. It doesn't need to be displayed, but it's honest and it's deeply felt. When you begin to place yourself in a more important position, something interesting happens. The relationships around you start revealing their true shape. Some people remain, even when you stop trying so hard to please them. They don't demand, they don't pressure. They simply stay, quietly walking beside you. And some people slowly drift away when you're no longer the familiar version they once leaned on. That distance may sting at first, but very quickly, it brings relief. There are relationships that once felt stable, but now exist mostly out of habit. You stayed not because the connection was still deep, but because you were afraid of disrupting a structure that had been in place for too long. By the end of this year, Sagittarius finds the courage to name that truth, not to blame anyone, not to be angry with yourself, but to understand that who you are now has changed, and what no longer fits, no matter how familiar it once felt, cannot continue to be your support. You begin to see that those who truly stand with you don't need you to be strong all the time. They don't need you to be cheerful or perfect. They only need you to be yourself, even on quiet days, even in moments of uncertainty, even in spaces you haven't yet learned to name. Their presence doesn't make you tense. It allows you to soften. And that kind of love is rare and deeply worth treasuring. At the same time, you also see more clearly the connections built on convenience or habit. Not wrong, not bad, just no longer aligned with your rhythm. Before, you may have tried to hold on, to explain, to adjust yourself so nothing would change. But now you understand that letting go in silence can sometimes be the kindest act for everyone involved. There is a quiet, beautiful maturity unfolding inside Sagittarius right now. You no longer need dramatic endings. You don't need announcements or explanations. You simply choose what deserves your time, your emotion, and your energy. And when you do, life begins to rearrange itself naturally, as if it had been waiting for you to make this choice all along. In these final days of the year, while the world outside keeps rushing, you begin to find a rhythm of your own, slower, deeper, more real. You're no longer afraid of being alone because you've learned how to be a kind companion to yourself. And in that new sense of fullness, the right connections arrive. Without searching, without calling them in, you simply recognize each other in a familiar peace, as if you had always belonged a long time ago. And just as that sense of familiarity is still gently settling in your chest, life quietly shifts in a way no one could have predicted. This December carries a moment Sagittarius won't easily forget. Not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it reaches straight into the deepest place, the place you once believed you had fully under control. A truth begins to surface. No long explanations. Just one small detail, enough to rearrange every piece into a completely different picture. It might be an offhand comment that feels painfully accurate. It might be an action that suddenly leaves you silent. Or it could be the absence of someone who was always there before. The moment arrives quickly, like a cold breeze brushing through the end of the year, leaving you still for a second. Your chest tightens. Your mind goes quiet. And in that silence, you understand that something has just closed. The pain is real. The disappointment is real. There are moments when you don't want to talk to anyone, don't want to explain, don't want to be strong. You just want to sit with what you're feeling, even if it's messy, even if it hasn't found a name yet. And that is completely okay. You don't need to rush past it. You don't need to force meaning onto it right away. Some truths need to be fully felt before they can be understood. Sagittarius is used to looking ahead, but this moment asks you to stop, not to get stuck, but to see clearly the foundation you've been standing on all along. You may realize that a relationship you once believed was solid had been cracking for quite some time. You may see that a path you followed for the sake of security no longer fits the person you're becoming. This collapse isn't entirely unexpected. It's something you sensed long ago, but weren't ready to face. During days like these, silence can last longer than usual. You speak less. You share less. You spend more time listening inward. Not to isolate yourself, but to give yourself the space you truly need. There are decisions that can't be postponed anymore, even if you don't have all the answers. And strangely enough, admitting that you don't know everything yet brings a quiet sense of relief. What makes this shock different is that it doesn't only take something away, it also opens something up. When an old foundation falls, you begin to see the limits you once accepted as normal. You realize how much effort you put into keeping things the same, even when it exhausted you. And when change becomes unavoidable, you understand that the greatest restraint often comes from false stability. You might wonder why this happens at the end of the year, when everyone hopes for a gentle ending. But perhaps it's precisely because This is a closing season that the truth needs to be spoken. So you don't carry old weight into a new cycle. So you don't keep building your future on a foundation that's already unstable. Sagittarius has a rare ability to find meaning even in the hardest experiences. But this time, meaning doesn't arrive immediately. It comes slowly. Through each day, you begin to accept what happened. Through each morning, you wake up and realize that despite the loss, you are still here, still breathing, still feeling, still capable of choosing again. This collapse is not the end. It's more like a door closing, so you no longer turn back to look behind you. It hurts. Yes, but it's honest. And in that honesty, you begin to feel lighter, even if you're not used to that feeling yet. Lighter because you no longer have to maintain what has expired. Lighter because you no longer have to pretend everything is fine. And as you slowly find your footing again after the shock, something subtle begins to happen. You no longer see the world through the same eyes. There's more clarity, more depth in your thoughts. You begin to understand that sometimes the best things don't arrive in the form we want, but in the form we need. And from the space that has just been created, a new opening quietly appears, wide enough for you to breathe more freely, and wide enough for something more honest to finally step into your life. At first, that empty space may feel unfamiliar to Sagittarius. It's like standing in a room that's just been cleared out, recognizable, yet no longer the same. The old sounds are gone. The roles you carried every day are no longer there. And in that quiet, a very human thought begins to surface. Am I stuck? Has everything gone too far to turn back now? But if you stay with this feeling long enough, you'll discover a gentler truth waiting to be heard. You are not stuck. You are simply standing still for the first time after a very long journey. Not because you're trapped, but because your mind is learning how to breathe in a different rhythm. Before this, you moved fast. You made decisions based on responsibility, expectations, and the fear of losing what felt familiar. You were afraid that if you let go, everything you built would fall apart. Afraid that if you changed, the image others had of you would disappear. Afraid that once you walked away, you would lose your place in your own story. But toward the end of this year, Sagittarius begins to look directly at those fears, not to judge them, only to understand them. You start to see that what made you feel confined was not your current situation, but the way you kept holding on to the past. There were responsibilities you continued to carry, even though they no longer belonged to you. Images you tried to preserve, even though they no longer reflected who you were becoming. And even something you once called your legacy, the marks you were proud of, had quietly turned into a garment that no longer fit. The feeling of being stuck often appears when a person stands between two versions of themselves. The old version, familiar, safe, recognized, and the new version, not yet fully formed, without guarantees, but carrying a sense of aliveness you haven't felt in a long time. Caught between those two, the mind easily becomes unsettled. You may wonder why you can't move forward, when in truth, you are already changing from the inside. There are days you wake up and feel less motivated than before. Not because you're weaker, but because the old motivations no longer fit. Goals that once excited you no longer reach your heart. And that doesn't mean you've lost your direction. It simply means your inner compass is being recalibrated slowly, but with great precision. Sagittarius often blames themselves for not moving fast enough. You're used to being the one who inspires, the one who always looks ahead. But right now, you're learning a different lesson. The lesson of a conscious pause. When things begin to break apart, when old layers fall away, you finally see why you remained still for so long in certain areas of your life. Not because you weren't capable, but because you stayed loyal to things that no longer nourished you. And then, a very subtle relief appears. When you stop forcing yourself to maintain an image, when you stop trying to hold on to what has already expired, your body and your mind begin to soften. You realize you can say no without guilt. You can change your mind without long explanations. You can choose again even if others don't understand. This freedom isn't loud, but it's real, like warmth slowly spreading through your chest. You begin to understand that standing still can sometimes be the deepest preparation for a major transformation. Seeds don't sprout the moment they're planted. They need darkness. They need stillness. They need time unseen. And so do you. This phase isn't for display. It's for formation, not for proving anything, but for reconnecting with what is most essential inside you. When you look back at what once held you in place, you no longer feel anger or regret. You feel gratitude. Gratitude for the experiences that brought you here. Gratitude for the clarity that now keeps you from repeating old patterns. And within that gratitude, a new energy begins to flow. Gentle, yet unmistakably clear. You may not yet be able to name the road ahead. Things may still feel misty, but you're no longer panicked. Because deep down, you understand that you haven't been left behind. You are exactly where you need to be. At the precise moment, you need to pause, so that when you begin walking again, each step won't be driven by habit, but by choice. And within that choice, a very quiet strength is slowly awakening. Strong enough to carry you forward with a new kind of faith, more grounded and more honest than ever before. And just as that faith begins to take root, the world around you can suddenly feel louder in a very specific way. That is not an accident. Sagittarius can feel this clearly at the end of the year, when you focus more on what you're building, when you work with a seriousness you haven't carried in a long time, and when you stop expanding your circle unconsciously. The movement inside you is like a light switching on in the dark. And light, no matter how gentle, tends to draw attention. There are days when you feel calm, steady, clear about your direction, and then a story appears from somewhere, uninvited. A comment that sounds harmless at first, but leaves a heavy aftertaste. A situation that seems small, but pulls you out of your rhythm. These things aren't here to destroy you. They are here to test whether you can hold on to the focus you just reclaimed. Sagittarius is sensitive to the energy around you, even if you don't always admit it. And this year, that sensitivity becomes sharper. You can tell when a conversation is no longer clean. You can feel it immediately when an interaction carries the intention to pull you down, even if it's wrapped in curiosity or concern or polite attention. Your intuition is sharp right now. The only question is whether you choose to trust it. Drama can show up in many forms. Repeated stories, circling around other people's conflicts. A feeling of being dragged into emotions that aren't even yours. Sudden disruptions in relationships that make you wonder why everything feels so complicated. But if you watch closely, you'll notice the pattern. Each time you move closer to clarity and peace, noise tries to squeeze its way in. The goal isn't to avoid all of it, because life doesn't work that way. The real point is how you respond. Before, you may have spent a lot of energy explaining, proving, making things clear, but now a subtle shift begins. You realize not everything needs a response. Not every word deserves your attention, and not every situation requires you to step in and manage it. This end-of-year season brings Sagittarius a lesson in focused awareness. When you work more seriously, when you invest your mind and your heart into what truly matters, your energy becomes more valuable, and anything trying to distract you in the end is aiming at that energy, not to help you, but to drain you. There may be moments you feel irritated, even angry, when you realize you've been pulled into unnecessary stories, but instead of blaming yourself, treat it as a reminder. Each time you return to your work, to your silence, to your breath, you strengthen an invisible boundary that is incredibly powerful. That boundary doesn't need announcements. It doesn't need explanations. People can feel it in the way your presence changes. When you narrow your circle, it isn't because you're cold or distant. It's because you've learned the value of discernment. Not everyone needs to know what you're thinking. Not everyone needs to hear your plans. Some things need to be planted in quiet, and in certain seasons, silence is the best protection there is. Sagittarius may feel like you're standing in front of a subtle test. Can you keep your focus when everything around you shakes? Can you protect your energy when disruptions keep showing up? And most of all, can you trust the path you've chosen without letting outside noise pull you off course? As you begin to master this, a very different feeling appears. Calm, not numbness, not indifference, but steadiness that rises from within. You stop reacting immediately. You observe more. You choose more carefully. And through that careful choosing, your energy begins to gather instead of scattering the way it used to. The end of the year is not the time to prove anything to the world. It's the time to prove something to yourself. That you can go far without being loud. That you can carry your light without shining it into every corner. And as you keep holding this focus, very naturally, a moment will arrive. A moment where you realize all the noise you faced was only a test, so you'd be ready for a deeper decision, quietly waiting ahead. And when that moment arrives, Sagittarius will realize it isn't unfamiliar at all. In truth, you've been carrying this decision inside you for a very long time. It showed up before as a fleeting sense of discomfort, as a thought you pushed aside because you were busy, as a question you didn't dare answer late at night when everything around you had already fallen asleep. By the end of this December, that question no longer whispers. It stands in front of you, clear, calm, as if it has been waiting patiently for the right moment to be met face to face. You begin to look at what you're holding on to. Some things still function. They still run. They still feel familiar. But if you're honest with yourself, you know they are no longer right. They no longer nourish you. They no longer reflect the person you are becoming. Like an old pair of shoes, you can still wear them, but every step feels heavier, tighter, and slowly erases the sense of freedom you once knew. Sagittarius is no stranger to starting over. You've stepped outside your comfort zone many times. You've trusted new journeys before. But this time is different. This isn't impulsive. It isn't driven by restless wanderlust. This decision has been shaped by long observation, by long silence, by countless moments of asking yourself what you are really living for. You may have tried to convince yourself to hold on just a little longer, that things would eventually work out. But toward the end of this year, your body stops cooperating with those reassurances. Your heart does too. Each time you imagine staying, you feel yourself sink. Each time you imagine letting go, even with fear, you feel a fresh current fill your chest. Light, but undeniably real. This decision doesn't require noise, no announcements, no explanations to the world. It begins quietly, with the simple admission that you have changed. That what fit the version of you yesterday does not have to fit the version of you today. And that leaving does not always mean failure. Sometimes it is the highest form of honesty. Yes, there will be pain, not sharp, not dramatic, but a quiet ache that slips into moments when you remember what once was. Pain from memories. Pain from effort you invested. Pain from the part of you that still wishes things could have turned out differently. But this pain does not pull you backward. It's like the sting of removing a bandage that's been stuck for too long. It burns, but it's necessary. And then, the skin begins to breathe. Sagittarius starts to understand that holding on to what is no longer right costs more than exhaustion. It costs your aliveness, your curiosity, your joy, your reason for waking up each morning with purpose. If you dare to let go, even without knowing exactly what waits ahead, you at least keep the truth. And truth, even when it first feels empty, is always fertile ground for something new to grow. On quiet year-end evenings, when the world slows down, you may sit with yourself and feel this clearly. No more inner battles, no harsh arguments inside, just a gentle acceptance that you've gone far enough on this path, that you're allowed to stop, and that choosing again does not erase what came before, but places it where it belongs, in memory, instead of letting it control the present. As this decision takes shape, you'll notice you're no longer fighting life. Things grow clearer in how you arrange your time, in how you respond to others, in how you speak to yourself. You stop trying to stretch what is already finished. You also stop rushing into the new. You simply stand steady, exactly where you are, trusting that you are doing what needs to be done. And within that intentional stillness, a very gentle sense of release spreads, as if you've finally set down a weight you carried for far too long. No applause, no witnesses, but you can feel it. From this moment forward, each step will no longer be endurance, but choice. And that choice opens a new space. A space where you no longer have to brace yourself just to survive, a space where you can live in true alignment with the real rhythm of your heart. And when you allow yourself to live this way, everything begins to feel simpler. Fewer questions demanding answers, fewer roles you're expected to carry. What remains is the truth, plain, unadorned, sometimes a little painful, but clear enough to keep you from losing your way. This December may have touched your most vulnerable places. It may have exposed the things you once avoided. But through that exposure, you were awakened from old patterns and gently redirected toward a path that fits who you truly are. Truth does not arrive to punish you. It arrives to free you. It strips away the layers, the quiet compromises, the choices you once made out of fear instead of trust. When you find the courage to face it, you no longer live halfway in and halfway out. You begin to rebuild, not from ruins, but from a foundation of clarity, self-respect, and honesty with yourself. A different direction is opening now, not loudly, not for display. A new purpose is taking shape, not driven by outside pressure, but by an inner calling. And alongside it, a new version of you begins to emerge, more grounded, more thoughtful, clear about what you need to live a life that feels whole. This end-of-year collision, uncomfortable as it may have been, becomes the very ground that allows you to step into a new cycle with a different perspective, calmer, wiser, and quietly hopeful. If these words resonate with you, if you feel your own heartbeat moving in rhythm with this story, stay here with the channel. Subscribe and continue the journey together. So each time you return, you find a moment of stillness, a new perspective, and a small light to guide you along your own path forward.